Last night, Jimmy Fallon's show unfolded in an unexpected way as Emma Watson's composure was put to the test live on air. A tense but civil discussion emerged, revealing her calm demeanor. The atmosphere was electric. The Tonight Show was in full swing, and tonight's guest was none other than Emma Watson, the renowned actress and activist. The buzz in the air was palpable, yet beneath the surface, something felt different. Emma, dressed in a sleek black dress, strode out to warm applause, her smile serene, her eyes acknowledging the room. Jimmy, ever the charming host, kicked things off with his usual warmth, tossing softballs about her latest film project. The audience laughed at his quips, and Emma's responses were articulate and thoughtful. You could feel a sense of mutual respect settling in the air. Jimmy leaned forward, his tone still light but probing. "So, Emma, you've been in the headlines a lot lately. Care to set the record straight on some of the noise out there?" The question was innocent enough, and it was met with a thoughtful pause. Emma's smile remained, and for a split second her eyes held a serious expression, maybe a flicker of weariness. She responded calmly, "Oh, Jimmy, you know how the media loves to sensationalize things. I'm just focusing on my work and my advocacy, you know." The audience clapped, a sound of genuine appreciation. Jimmy raised an eyebrow, his grin gentle. "Focusing on your advocacy, huh? That's a great sentiment. But let's talk about those documents that just leaked. What's the truth there?" The crowd murmured, intrigued. The question was a direct one, and Emma was ready. Her face remained composed, her lips in a steady line. The court documents, freshly leaked and plastered across social media, alleged new details about her past legal dealings, contradicting some public statements she'd made. Jimmy, the king of keeping things light, was serious now. "I mean, people are talking, Emma. They're saying those documents paint a different picture. Do you want to clear that up for us?" His tone was respectful, with a clear challenge. Emma's composure did not crack. She remained seated, her hands resting calmly on her lap. "Jimmy, I'd rather not get into the specifics of old legal matters, but I am happy to clarify the broader context." The audience listened intently, sensing the shift. Jimmy tilted his head, unfazed. "Old legal matters? These documents were all over the internet yesterday, Emma. They're saying there might be some inconsistencies. It's not just tabloid gossip, it's a matter of public record." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of shock and curiosity. Emma's eyes met his directly, without flinching. "I'm not trying to dodge anything, Jimmy. I've always been an open book. Let's talk about it." She leaned forward, her voice calm and firm. The audience was riveted, phones already out, capturing every second. Emma's jaw was set with resolve, and she leaned forward, her voice filled with conviction. "You want the truth, Jimmy? The truth is, people often misunderstand things that are taken out of context. Those documents are part of a very complex legal situation, and a few details picked out do not tell the whole story." The accusation hung in the air, and the crowd was silent, waiting for Jimmy's response. Jimmy raised a hand, acknowledging her. Whoa, I'm not questioning your integrity. I'm just asking you to explain why those documents say what they say. For example, the part about the audio recordings." He paused, letting the words sink in. The audience went dead silent. The audio recordings leaked alongside the documents, capturing Emma in moments that seemed to contradict her public statements. Social media had been ablaze with clips, and now Jimmy was bringing them into the spotlight. Emma's face remained calm, and she responded quickly, her voice even. "Those recordings are indeed out of context. You're not ambushing me, Jimmy. You're giving me a platform to clarify." The crowd stirred, some nodding in agreement. Jimmy shook his head, his tone steady and firm. "Ambushing? Emma, you're on a talk show. People want answers. I'm giving you the chance to give them." He gestured to the audience, who were on the edge of their seats. Emma's eyes remained focused, and she leaned in, her voice low. "I appreciate that, Jimmy. This is exactly what a talk show should be, a place for honest conversation." The statement was met with a ripple of applause. Jimmy's smile returned entirely. He leaned forward, elbows on his desk, his gaze locked on her. "So what's it going to be in him? Emma, are you going to tell us what's real or keep dodging?" The studio was a pressure cooker, but Emma remained poised. Her hands were still, but her face was a mask of concentration. She opened her mouth to respond, and the words came out clearly and thoughtfully. The silence stretched, bearable, as the world waited for her next move. The silence in Studio 6B was still, every eye fixed on Emma Watson as she sat, poised and collected. Jimmy Fallon's challenge hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. "What's it going to be, Emma? Are you going to tell us what's real or keep dodging?" Her hands, still and calm, rested on her lap. The audience held its breath. The tension was present, but it was one of anticipation, not fury. Emma's eyes flicked to the crowd, then back to Jimmy, her expression a mix of composure and resolve. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and firm. "You think you've got me cornered, Jimmy?" "I don't. I think you're giving me a chance to speak." Jimmy didn't flinch. His elbows stayed planted on his desk, his gaze unwavering. "I'm not playing games, Emma. I'm asking you to own your story. Those audio recordings, your voice, your words are out there for the world to hear. You can't just wave that away." The crowd erupted in murmurs, some nodding in agreement, others whispering in shock. The leaked recordings had been trending online for hours. Clips of Emma's voice were being interpreted in ways that clashed with her public narrative. Social media was quick to judge, and now Jimmy was bringing that conversation into the studio. Emma's lips curved into a small, sad smile. "You're loving this, aren't you?" The great Jimmy Fallon getting to have a serious, meaningful conversation. Her words were calm, with no tremor beneath them. The audience stirred, a mix of quiet support and curiosity. Jimmy raised a hand, quieting them, his face deadly serious. "This isn't about clicks, Emma. It's about the truth. You've been telling one story for years, but those recordings, they're being interpreted to tell a different one. So why don't you explain it to us right now?" The challenge was a respectful one, and Emma's eyes were clear. She leaned forward, her voice steady and deliberate. "You want an explanation? Fine. Those recordings were part of a private conversation, taken out of context and edited to create a false narrative. I'm confident that when the full context is considered, the truth becomes clear." The explanation sparked a fresh wave of murmurs from the audience. Jimmy's jaw tightened slightly, but he kept his cool, his voice steady. "Edited? That's a bold claim. The internet has the full tapes, Emma. People have heard them. You're saying it's all fake?" Emma remained seated, her posture perfect. "I'm saying it's a smear campaign, but I'm not a victim. I'm here to set the record straight." The audience applauded, a mix of cheers and quiet appreciation as she sat calmly in her chair. Jimmy stood up, a rare move for him. His height gave him a quiet authority. "A smear campaign? I'm just asking questions, Emma. Questions you seem to have a hard time answering." His tone was calm but probing, and the crowd leaned in. Their phones were capturing every second of the escalating drama. Emma faced him, her hands still in her lap. "You're not accusing me, you're giving me a chance to defend myself. That's not a trial, that's a platform." Her voice was firm, betraying no panic. The audience was a powder keg of curiosity. Some shouted, "Tell the truth," while others chanted her name in support. Jimmy didn't back down, stepping around his desk to close the distance between them. "You're on a talk show, Emma, and if you're feeling a bit cornered, maybe it's because the truth is catching up. You can't keep deflecting forever." The words were a direct challenge, and Emma's face was serene. "You have no idea what it's like to be scrutinized like this," she said calmly, her voice audible over the crowd's noise. "You sit there knowing you've given me a fair chance." Jimmy's eyes narrowed, his patience unwavering. "I am. I'm giving you a chance to tell your side, and you're explaining your perspective. If the recordings are indeed taken out of context, prove it right now. Tell us what really happened." Emma froze for a second, her breath even. The studio was a cauldron of conversation, the audience's chants and murmurs blending into a curious hum. Her eyes darted to the exit, then back to Jimmy, who stood firm, waiting. "You want the truth?" she said, her voice low and direct. "The truth is, people like you and me are trying to have a real conversation about facts. We're not about drama." She took a step toward him, her voice rising. "You are a great host, Jimmy. This is your job. The audience applauded, the noise a mix of support and appreciation. Jimmy shook his head, his voice cutting through the cheers. It is my job, Emma, and it's your job to be honest with your audience. If you have nothing to hide, why is it so hard to answer a simple question? The crowd cheered louder. She stood there, chest calm, her eyes clear. For a moment, it looked like she might address him directly again. Instead, she turned to the audience, her voice steady and confident. You all think you know me? I hope that today you know a little more. The words were a calm statement, and they calmed the crowd's energy. Jimmy watched, his expression unreadable, as Emma's facade remained uncracked, her next move in her control. The studio was still, the audience's buzz like a hum as Emma Watson stood center stage, her chest calm, her eyes bright with a mix of resolve and honesty. You all think you know me? I hope you do now, she said, her voice clear under the weight of emotion. The crowd's response was a mix of cheers and quiet contemplation. Jimmy Fallon, still standing, his face a mask of calm intensity, didn't let her words slide. I'm doing my job, Emma, he repeated, his voice slicing through the noise. You're the one telling your story. If you've got a thani mind to hide, why is it so hard to answer a simple question? His words were a challenge, unrelenting, and the audience leaned forward, phones aloft, capturing every second of the escalating showdown. Emma's head snapped back to him, her eyes bright. A simple question? She said, her voice dripping with sincerity. You're not setting traps, Jimmy. You're providing a forum for clarification. The crowd buzzed, some nodding in agreement. Emma stood a step, her heels silent. This is how we fix things, not by running from them. She gestured calmly at the audience who murmured in agreement. Jimmy's jaw tightened slightly, but his tone stayed even, cutting. I'm giving you a chance to clear your name there. Those recordings, your voice admitting things aren't going away. People wanted to know why you said what you said, so stop deflecting and start talking. The crowd's noise swelled, a mix of cheers for Jimmy's bluntness and support for Emma. Her face remained composed, her composure unshaken. You're focused on those recordings, she said, her voice rising slightly. They were taken out of context. You're not being lazy, Jimmy. You're doing your job to ask tough questions. The audience applauded, the statement landing like a moment of truth. Jimmy's eyes flashed, and he kept his cool, stepping closer, his voice low and deliberate. I've heard the tapes, Emma. We all have. You're saying it's all out of context, but you haven't explained a single word. Why is that? The question was a scalpel, precise and unrelenting. The crowd hushed, sensing a turning point. Emma's breath was calm, her eyes darting to the audience, then to Jimmy as if considering her next words. You're listening, she said, her voice shaking slightly. But it is hard to have your life analyzed by the world. Jimmy didn't budge, his gaze locked on her. I understand that, Emma, but those recordings sound like they need a full explanation. The crowd erupted in murmurs, some chanting, "Explain! Explain!" While others applauded her bravery. She spun toward them, her voice raw. You think you're so righteous sitting there judging me? I'm here, trying to be transparent. Her words were a call for understanding, and they fueled the audience's support, their shouts joining hers. Jimmy raised a hand, silencing the crowd with a single gesture. Let's cut the noise, he said, his voice firm, commanding. Emma, you're not dodging, but you haven't answered one question. Why not just tell us what happened? What's stopping you? The studio fell silent, the weight of his words pressing down on everyone. Emma's face was a mix of concentration and resolve. What's stopping me? She said, her voice barely audible, then louder. Nothing. This whole platform is designed for this. I could have come clean, and I am. Right now, I'm not pointing fingers. He leaned back, arms crossed, his eyes watching her respond. The crowd was a live wire, their energy crackling. Emma's hands were steady, her face a storm of emotions. I am not the villain here, she said, her voice low, almost a growl. You don't know the half of it. Jimmy tilted his head, his voice sharp. Then tell me the half of it, Emma. Tell us right now. The challenge was electric, the studio holding its breath. Emma's eyes widened, her lips parting as if to speak, and the words came out clearly. The silence stretched taut and bearable as every eye in the room bore down on her. Her next move would define the conversation, and the world was watching, waiting for the truth. The studio was a crucible, every eye locked on Emma Watson as she stood composed, her lips parted, words escaping. Jimmy Fallon's challenge. "Then tell me the half of it, Emma. Tell us right now," hung in the air, a direct call for honesty. The silence was one of pure anticipation. Emma's eyes, calm and clear, darted from Jimmy to the crowd. Her breath was steady, her hands by her sides. The weight of the moment pressed down, and she took a breath. Her expression hardened, her jaw clenching as she straightened, defiance flaring in her gaze. "You want the truth?" she said, her voice low and firm, slicing through the hush. "The truth is, this is a mess, but I'm going to own it." The crowd gasped, a wave of applause erupting. But Emma barreled on, her voice rising. "You think those recordings tell the whole story? They're scraps, yes, but they're my words. I'm not the monster you want me to be. I'm a person who made a mistake." Her words were a desperate salvo, and they landed with a raw honesty that silenced the audience. Jimmy, still standing, his face a mask of controlled respect, shook his head. "Mistake, Emma. We're just asking for clarity. Those recordings aren't scraps. They're your voice, your words. You admitted things that don't line up with your story. If they're a mistake, untangle them. Right here, right now." His tone was razor sharp, but still respectful. The audience roared, some chanting, "Answer, answer," while others offered their support. She spun towards them, her face flushed, her voice cracking with emotion. "I think you're all so quick to judge." The accusation ignited the crowd. Their shouts were a chaotic mix of support and frustration. Jimmy raised a hand, his authority cutting through the noise. "Enough, Emma. Stop blaming the public. You've had every chance to explain, and all you've done is own up to a mistake. Now prove it. Tell us what really happened in those recordings." His words were a final ultimatum, his eyes boring into her. The studio fell into a tense hush, every phone trained on Emma, capturing her every move. Her chest was calm, her eyes flickering with a mix of resolve and honesty. For a moment, it looked like she might try, might offer something to salvage herself. Instead, she smiled, a hidden, honest sound that sent a calm through the room. "Prove it to you. You are worth it, Jimmy. All of you are." The crowd exploded, a mix of cheers and awe. Emma's face was calm, her voice steady. "You want to understand? Fine. I'll be your truth teller." She kept her mic on, the sound clear through the studio. The audience cheered, some standing, others shouting. Jimmy stepped forward, his voice steady but respectful. "Emma, you're only proving my point. Facing the music clears your name." She whirled on him, her eyes bright. "I'm not running. I'm done with the lies. Done with the drama." She gestured wildly at the audience, who were now a sea of chaos. Some were chanting for her to stay and explain. Emma's gaze swept the room, her expression a mix of fury and resolve. "You'll all remember this," she said, her voice barely audible over the noise. "You think you've won, but you've just bought into the truth." With that, she turned on her heel, her heels clicking softly as she walked toward the stage exit. Jimmy called after her, his voice cutting through the noise. "Emma, the truth doesn't walk away. It faces the music." The crowd roared, a mix of cheers for Jimmy and applause for Emma. She paused at the edge of the stage, her back to the audience, her shoulders rigid. For a heartbeat, it seemed she might turn back, might say something to reclaim the narrative. But then she pushed through the curtain, disappearing into the wings. Her exit was met with a thunderous mix of applause and cheers. The stage lights dimmed, and Jimmy stood alone, his face unreadable, as the audience's energy pulsed around him. He turned to the crowd, his voice calm but firm. "Well, folks, that's how we planned tonight to go." A ripple of laughter broke the tension, but Jimmy's eyes were serious. "Sometimes the truth comes out in ways you don't expect." "We'll be right back after this." The band struck up, The cameras panned to the cheering audience and the show cut to commercial. But the buzz in Studio 6B lingered. The confrontation was already going viral. Clips of Emma's honesty and resolve were flooding social media. Her grace, her defiance, her composed exit. It was the talk show showdown no one saw coming and no one would forget.